What's up, everybody? Welcome back to 30 to Life. It's your boy, Uso Ron. And today we got a special guest for y'all, man. And I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself to you. What's your name, Uso, and where you from?
My name is Uso James Rasmussen Jr., but family and friends call me VJ, and I'm from Oceanside, California.
That's right. That's right. So you and me were talking just a minute ago, and you was talking about how you were only a few days shy from 30 years in prison. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to ask you, what your childhood was like and growing up. I mean, did you come out here from the islands? Did you always live? You said you're in San Diego?
I am.
Did you? Right. Is that where you grew up?
Well, no. So looking back, when I think about these types of things, I'm kind of atypical when it comes to the type of gang member or Uso that I am. And for a while, I was ashamed of that person. And that's kind of like the base story of how I came to be. So I'm an Army brat. I didn't grow up in California. I ended up in California. So what it is that my father was in the Army. And when he got out of the Army, this is the place we chose to live. I was actually in Germany in July of '90 when we came here. So I've pretty much been all over the world, traveling with pops and family and stuff like that. And when I say atypical gang member, it's like I said, I didn't grow up in this life. I inherited it.
Right. So how old were you when you made it out here to California then?
I was 14 and a half.
14 and a half. Okay. And you said you were introduced to the gangs, or you were like, it was embedded in you, or?
It's one of those things where I used to make excuses and try to rationalize my involvement in gangs. I like to say that where I grew up, all Samoans. And that's kind of the reason why I kept getting denied at borders, is that I would use that disclaimer. I would say that all Usos were Bloods, all Blacks are Crips, all my family members are gang members. Yeah. And the truth of the matter is that it wasn't anything like that. I remember being blindsided at board by one of the questions, by both board and the psych. And they were like, well, tell me about your brothers and sisters. Don't you have any cousins that went on to do good things in life? And I had to think for a moment. I was like, I was actually stuck. I got caught in a lie that I didn't realize was so embedded in my subconscious that, of course, it cost me a couple more years of my life in prison.
Man, it's crazy the way we look at things, right? When we're growing up and, we see things a certain way and we just take it as truth and we ride with it for most of our lives until we get older and we realize how things like that, we don't need to follow. We can change, we can do something different, or it wasn't like what we thought it was, it's just what we were going through at the moment. So what was it like for you, growing up in Cali, as a youngster and hanging out with everyone? Was there a big Samoan community in your area, or?
Well, again, starting off, coming to California from Germany and living the life that I lived, I was a happy-go-lucky kid. I was used to playing in the woods, fishing, because I grew up pretty much on the East Coast, out in Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, before moving out to Germany. But in each of those times that my father was restationed, we would go to Samoa and stay there for 6-7 months, maybe a year, while he set up shop. And then we would come back to the States. So again, I don't want to say I was whitewashed, but I was innocent in the sense that I didn't know about any of the things going on in California. So I get here and my eyes are opened. Where once before I was unique in all these other states where I was the only Samoan kid next to the one Puerto Rican kid, next to the one Black kid and one Asian kid. I come to California and I'm one of 7 Samoans in my class. So I'm no longer unique. Not just that, I'm whitewashed. I talk like dude. I ride a skateboard. I wear Pendletons, not with the buttons tied up at the top, but tied around my waist by the sleeves. I'm wearing Airwalks. No one's wearing that stuff. Right. And I remember just feeling culturally displaced. Not understand that here in California, that is the culture. That's the mindset. And so for one reason or another, which like you were saying, it's this perception we have of who we think the world wants us to be or act like, that I just discarded all those things. I threw away my uniqueness. At the time I was sentenced to life, I was freshman president of my high school. I was in ROTC with plans on following my father into the military. I have like a 3.6 average GPA, and all because I wanted to be Uso and belong and fit in and be cool. I just threw all that shit away. And for what? For a life sentence.
Man, it's crazy because what you said right there, I went through the same thing, you know, just being the only Samoan in Vacaville and, you know, trying to get in where I could fit in myself. So I really understand what you're saying as far as, you know, not really fitting in, just wanting to be a part of it because you felt like you were out of place, you know, but you were being you. And that's what we need to realize is we need to keep our own identity. We don't need to follow those crowds and things like that. That's why we're doing this right now. Yeah. But yeah, for sure. So, so tell us what happened. You know, you ended up getting involved with gangs, you know, so you were out here at 14. How long did it take for you until you really got involved with gangs and really started pushing in that type of life?
Not even 3 months later, because a year and a half later, I was already sentenced to life. And the thing about it is that, you know, the Usos, you know, the Samoan community, I won't say the Usos so much as I will say the Samoan community, they viewed me as an outsider because, again, I didn't grow up with them. Even though I had a lot of family members in Oceanside who were, you know, a part of this lifestyle, they couldn't validate or verify who I was. They just know that, hey, here's this kid who's coming from Germany, of all places, with a German last name, although my last name is Scandinavian, so let's get that correct. It's Rasmussen. So those are the issues that I had dealt with. And because of those things, I had a lot of insecurities. I was 155. So in a time where Samoans were considered like these football juggernauts, they were all like 250 pounds by the 6th grade. You know, I was a freshman weighing 150. And my last name was Rasmussen. So going to these Samoan churches and, again, you know, intermingling with my community or with my people, I felt out of place. And so slowly but surely, I started divorcing myself from what I had known, what I had grown up being. I want to say that when it comes to our perception of things, none of us are born, you know, with our parents being, you know, with the doctors handing us over to our parents saying, and our parents holding us up saying like, look, I cannot wait for you, Ron, VJ, to grow up and kill somebody. I cannot wait for you to rob a bank or sell drugs so that you can get a life sentence so I can visit you for the rest of your life in prison. None of us are born into those expectations. But for some reason or another, you know, again, we give up our uniqueness. And that's the thing, I was already unique before, you know, before all the gang stuff.
Yeah, that's real talk. Man, you just don't know how much I can relate to your story, man. But so you were trying to fit in, you get involved with these gangs and everything, and so and then a year later you end up getting a life sentence. So you really got into it real heavy. When this happened, when you ended up catching a life sentence, you were a good student and everything. How did the community or your family react to this? You know, like, I mean, was it a shocker or did they see you kind of like going downhill, declining, you know, over that year period?
They saw signs of it, but like in most things in criminal thinking, we disguise it. We hide it well. You know, me sagging or walking around with clothes that didn't fit was not a go. You know, my family didn't buy anything firsthand. Everything was bought secondhand. And I used to be ashamed to say those things, but in understanding family dynamics and having to provide for 7 kids, well, 6 at the time, because my baby sister wasn't born yet. I didn't understand these things. I want to have Nike Cortezes like everyone. I don't wear Dickies, but instead I had Pro Wings and XJ 900s. You know, I had all these like hand-me-down clothes or low budget clothes. But in hanging out or, you know, again, following my cousins, them dressing me, I learned how to disguise those things. You know, when I was away from, as soon as I got on the bus or as soon as I left the house early in the morning, it was gangbang mentality. And the reason why I progressed so quickly is because I wanted to make a name for myself. I always had this chip on my shoulder like I had something to prove. We would get into hood fights. And this is back when you could fight, where you didn't have to pull out a knife or a gun. And, you know, the one black gang would be here and our gang would be here. And they would be like, I want to fight him. But they would always want to fight me because I was the smallest one. but I had hands. So that was the blessing in and of itself, because I was able to, like, again, change my stature, not just in the city, but in the neighborhood.
Right. So the reason why I asked you that question is because I always wonder, like for me especially, but I always wonder, if my parents would have talked to me more, maybe if we had more of an open communication and I could have explained to them what was going on with me, you know what I'm saying? I was asking you that question, wondering if somebody might have intervened during this time, or maybe even talked to you to ask you what was going on, would you have made different choices?
I most definitely would have. Looking back, I use that as an excuse. For many times I went to the board. It took me 7 times to get out of prison. And of 5 times, I'd always blamed it on my parents. I said that I had resentments towards them. And I did. Honestly, I did. And it's like, exactly like you said, they saw it, but in their eye, and I don't want to say in most family eyes, look, this one's gone. Let's focus on the other 6. Let's focus on the other 5 kids. There's nothing we can do for them. Even though I wasn't at that point where my family actually knew what I was doing, they had hints of it. Because if I'm bringing my cousins and family over to the house and they're all dressed like this, and I'm the only one with my pants pulled up and, looking, squared up, there's obviously something wrong. My parents weren't stupid. But what I've come to understand about our culture is that we have a tough love, and with that, I don't think they knew how to communicate. They knew how to love, but not in the sense that you and I understand it. Those of us getting out of prison understand it, thanks to these self-help classes. And I look at the generation before them. How did my grandparents raise my parents? If they're coming from the islands, it's just out there working the land, tilling the soil, just barefoot, just hard life. So if my parents weren't shown the kind of love that we expected, how could they show me that kind of love? And it goes back to the saying, don't know love, can't show love. My family's, or my mother and father's idea of love was, I provide for you a roof over your head, food in your stomach, and clothes in your back. I don't have to tell you I love you. I show you that I love you. But as a kid trying to find his identity, you're right. I needed more. I needed them to pull me aside and say, hey, what's going on with you? What's going on in your life? How come you're not going to football practice anymore? What are these calls that we're getting from the school saying that you missed 2nd and 3rd period or 4th period? Why are your grades dropping? But again, in my immaturity, I couldn't understand that. I just said, you guys don't love me. You don't care about me. These people care about me. They show me love. So that's who I'm going to embrace. They're my surrogate family. They're my new family.
Man, that's real talk right there. So it sucks that we go through that, because I went through the same thing. I have a lot of resentment towards my parents, and I've been working on it over these years and everything. I went through a lot of things myself. And I think that was a lot of the reason, though, is my upbringing, the household and everything is what caused me, like you said, to go out and find this type of love, this type of homie or whatever, someone who understands me. And I started hanging around and getting in trouble. So I did the same thing. My question to you would be, I know you wanted to be like these guys and like your cousins and everything, but, you got, in my opinion, were you just being rebellious because of the family upbringing and everything? That's why you started getting in trouble? Or was it really just the whole gang life that really attracted you?
I was at a pivotal point in my life. I was at that age where, I was doing kid things that I enjoyed, but I was coming into, I was leaving my pre-adolescence. I was becoming a young teenager, and I was starting to notice girls. I was starting to notice what the gangs or people in that lifestyle call the finer things. I didn't want to walk to school while my homeboys drove cars. I didn't want to ride the bus. My father was a bus driver at the time. And those things, again, played a major part in my decision in joining and following in their footsteps. Also, a contributing factor was my family members. I had uncles who were big homies from my gang. And it was just one thing to know that, not so much to be ostracized, again, because I came in looking and acting and talking a particular way, but in everything that I did going forward, it was like, hey, that's my nephew, that's my boy, that's my Uso, that's my cousin. And so those things just reinforced everything I was doing, negative or otherwise. And it's because of those things that I continue down the path. It's not so much that I continue these resentments. I think I use those things as an excuse because, again, not knowing or going away from what I had, in order to I guess, to easier explain is that I had nothing to compare it to. Mm-hmm. So I have this one lifestyle, these one feelings and emotions, this mindset, these thoughts with my family at home. And I've been used to that for 14 and a half years of my life. And then my eyes are open, like, Adam, in the garden, to just all these things, exponentially. And what they're showing me are like, they have pay value to me, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, and I'm loving all of it. And I'm like, wow, this is life. And so like you were asking me, I was at a pivotal point in my life where this is who I want to be now. I no longer want to be this VJ. I want to be Laughing Boy. I want to be this gang member. I want to be this dude who has the car, the money, and the women.
Right. So was it, okay, so it took you about a year before you went in, which was really quick. Did you go to any other place before prison, or was it just first time ever being locked up, straight to prison?
I went to a Juvenile Ranch facility called Campo, and I did 9 months there. And again, in no way did it reform or rehabilitate me. It just reinforced the idea that this is the life I want to be. I go in there, it's San Diego based. So in Oceanside, we're North San Diego County, and anyone from this small area of North San Diego County, we carry a chip on our shoulder. I'm not sure if you can relate. More than likely you can, but we're San Diego County. And so when I say I'm from Oceanside, they're like, where's that at? So I'm like, hell nah. So I'm going to get off. I'm going to do what I got to do so that fools know, like, hey, he's from Oceanside. That's North San Diego County. We are a part of the city. Yeah. And too many times, again, we get to prison, we're not saying, see, Orange County, they could say Orange County. Everyone knows Orange County, and they know Santa Ana, or they know LA, and they know Compton and Carson. But you say San Diego, all they know is San Diego. They don't know about Oceanside and the other little sub-cities and stuff. So that's one of the reasons I can say.
Right. Okay, so it didn't change nothing. You went and did this little bit of time, and you came out like, man, this is where I'm at. This is what it's going to be like.
I couldn't put on a T-shirt because my head was so big, It goes on in what they call the G file, the resume. You get the tattoos, you carry a gun, you jump people, but you got to go to prison. You got to do time, or you're not certified. You're not a criminal. You're not part of the hood. And, all the war stories, the things that we glamorize as far as the big homies, the uncles and the relatives and the cousins going into prison, going to camp, going to YA. Those are the things that, we hold in our mind as checklists. Like, I did this. Oh, I haven't done that, but I'm on my way. Right. And that's fatalistic. That's nihilistic thinking. And it's just sad and sickening to think that I and a lot of us thought like that. That was something we had to do. We had to kill somebody, hurt somebody, go to prison. But for life, nah.
Yeah, it's definitely a crazy mentality. What some of us grow up with, and to think that in order, I say this to a lot of people. When I was growing up, I didn't know what it was like to be a man. I was trying to figure it out, So, I was doing whatever I thought was what being a man was about, and I had it all twisted. And so I made those mistakes. But just knowing that, like, you want to earn stripes to get to the penitentiary, man. It's a crazy thing, but it's what people really believe, when they're involved in that life. So can you tell us about, what led up to your incarceration? What do you remember, like prior to that, how was things going?
So there were a lot of things going into what would eventually become my life sentence. And one of the main contributing or causative factors was that my house was shot up on Christmas Eve, on Christmas Eve. And again, that's another pivotal point in my lifestyle, because at this time, while there were guns in Oceanside, and I'm keeping it 100, they weren't as prevalent as they were in other cities, in counties surrounding us, like in LA or Orange County. So the thing about it is that I was involved in so much that we had left the east side, where the hub of my neighborhood is at, and we moved to what's called the Mid-Valley, behind the drive-ins. And again, this is Oceanside, but this is a predominantly Black and Crip neighborhood. And because of this, you know, they're like, who's this dude right here? Like, you know, he's Samoan. We know he's Samoan, but like, where'd he come from, man? He's got on the wrong color in the wrong part of town. Long story short, it was like a mutual respect thing because a lot of my older homeboys knew their families because they had lived in this part of the city for a while. Well, other Crips, you know, visiting other Crips, they see me and they're like, that nigga VJ? Like, oh shit, like, so I was marked. And beyond that, another thing that had led up to that event was, so I have and this is like a disclaimer. So related to Junior Seau, you know, the Hall of Famer, Charger Seau. His younger brother's my crime partner.
Oh, wow.
And so at this time, he was living with us. And while he was commuting to El Camino High School, I was going to Oceanside High School, he was jumped at a bus stop. So these things added on to who I thought I was, who my cousins that I was hanging around thought they were. Retaliation it's a promise. Vengeance is a promise. It's not something that you're going to do. It's something you have to do. So not only did they jump my cousin and we were in the hunt for these guys, they ended up shooting up my house on Christmas Eve. So at this point, it's no more talking. And not that I was a talker, but I knew that I had to, you know, I wasn't going to jump anybody.
Yeah.
So I was provided a weapon. And from that point, you know, I was on, I don't want to say patrol, but I was like actively looking for these people because I knew in my heart that I already set my mind to it that I wanted to shoot. And what's crazy, I don't think the word kill was in my mindset. So I don't want to say like right now that I wanted to kill people, but I did want to shoot and hurt people. I wanted to cause these people the same type of fear and pain and suffering that they had caused, not just my relative, but my family members.
Right. Yeah, man, it's crazy. Okay. So, you know, this happens and I'm just tripping on your story. It's so similar to mine. So this happens in your life and you decide to get retaliation. And so obviously it happened, you know, you went to prison. So tell us, you know, what was that like when you finally get arrested and you're sitting in county jail? What is going through your mind now when you're facing, you know, such a harsh crime at the moment?
So initially, because I was a juvenile, I didn't go to county jail. And actually, what had happened was they were doing their investigative process. So it wasn't until like a month and a half later before I was picked up by a truancy officer. And he was the gang detail. And he happened to know a lot of us Samoans, the youth. So we just ended up having a conversation, but more or less he was leaning towards the crime. He's like, so anything come about the shooting? You know, you hear anything about that? I'm like, nah, I don't know what you're talking about. Fast forward, I ended up getting arrested for it. And because my crime involved 9 victims, I had 7 adults and 2 people who were considered children. They were like actively pursuing this. This wasn't something that you could sweep under the carpet, you know? Mm-hmm. So when the time came and I was arrested, I was taken to juvenile halls and preliminary, I was given a 707 hearing so that I was tried as an adult. And so from there, I was sent to YA. And while I was in YA, again, this is not prison. There are no rules. You fight whoever you fight. You're cool with whoever you're cool. But it's just like gladiator school, and that's what it's referred to. And so I was just a knucklehead doing what I had to do because in my mind, I thought I would be there until I was at least 25. And then I would go to prison. No, as soon as I turned 18, 2 years later, they were like, get him the fuck out of here, send him to prison. And then I opened up High Desert State Prison.
Wow. What year was this when this all happened? You went to CYA and all that?
So this is 93. So throughout 92 to 93, I was in juvenile halls fighting my case. I went for a 90-day diagnostic, came back in June. So July of 93, I was on my way to YA. Mm-hmm. I went to Southern Reception Center, SRCC, where I would eventually meet Dillinger and a couple other Usos who later on in line I would meet in prison as well. So it's funny like that, but it isn't because this is the path we chose. You know, this was like the high school of sorts, you know, call that, you know.
So you're sitting in YA and you're getting in trouble, and by the time you hit 18, they were like, "Man, you out of here," you know? Because normally you would have did 20, what, till you're 25, and then possibly get out, or what?
25, they was the leeway age they could have helped me to, but 21 discipline. Well, 25 is a disciplinary age. 21, I could have been released, but I didn't know any of these things. And
Yeah.
for me, in my ignorance, and a lot of our ignorance, we think that life is forever. And that's what it means. You know, that's where hopelessness begins for a lot of us who get sentenced to life. In that moment, when we're sentenced by the judge, we draw the line. And we say, on this side of the line is everything I cared for and once cared for, and that's gone. Now I'm ready to embrace this other half of my new life, my new gang, which would be, you know, the Usos and the others in prison.
Right.
But yeah, some people go to Penn State. I went to the state pen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after you left YA, what reception did you go to?
I was in Chino for like 6 months. Then I went to Delano for like 1 month, because at this time they had just killed this woman officer in YTS. Yeah. Right after I had already left. And while I was waiting to go to whatever prison I was going to go to, I'd actually requested Sentinel and Calipatria to stay in the lower, you know, near San Diego, near Oceanside. And they were like, no. And this is in 95. They were like, no, we just opened this prison in Susanville, California called High Desert, and we need bodies. So guess what, sir? You're out of here. So I spent like a month in Delano after Chino, and from there, my prison career began.
Mm-hmm. So when you hit Chino, was there any Usos there when you hit there? Like, was it, you know, because like with me, I ran into a bunch of Usos in San Quentin, but some people, you know, they don't run into any Usos on the yard. So was there a lot there when you hit Chino?
I didn't run into a mother-loving thing. I think I ran into one Uso, and he was like,
exactly.
He was like a weirdo. And I was already like in that gang mentality. You know, I'd already been told the war stories, but nothing ever measures up to what you're told. You know, they tell you this is what to expect, and you get there and it's nothing like that. I got there was no one to embrace me. There was no other car. I saw Asians, and I thought I'd expected them, you know, thinking that maybe they had been there for a while, that they'd be like, hey, you a Uso? Like, this is where we're at. No. The people who actually embraced me were like Mexicans, and they were telling me like, hey, you know, like when you get to where you're going, this isn't the main line. This isn't shit. But this is how you need to run your program. Be careful, you know, so on and so forth. And pretty much a lot of these things I knew because I had that same mentality in why. But now I knew that this was real. You know, I step out of line, I can get stabbed, or I say the wrong thing or act too hard. You know, these I'm a kid in a grown man's world. You know, kind of where a big man draws.
Right. So you know, you go to High Desert now, and you hit your first level 4, and like you said, you know, that wasn't the main line in Chino, so you hit your first main line in High Desert, which was rocking and rolling.
Yes, it was.
Tell us, what was it like when you got there? I'm sure the Usos were short there too, but tell us what it was like when you got there.
But when I got there was like 4 or 5 feet of snow. So that was the first thing. I was like, and the cops were trying to create this mentality that we run this program, not you guys. So they had us handcuffed behind our backs, holding our fish, our rolls, our bed rolls, in the freaking snow and Jap slaps, just freezing our ass off. And around this time, they had a lot of things going on between, I think it was the East Coast Crips and inmates and staff in Calipatria. So we were actually the third bus up there. The first bus came from Calipatria, the second came from Mill Creek, and of course our bus from Delano. So we get up there and I run into Usos, well not Usos, but Sainas, Asians that were in Calipatria, who had done time, who had come on this bus, who were there before me. And so a lot of them had come from, you know, or knew about the system at least, or had done time on other main lines where they were able to like embrace me and tell me like, hey, you know, what do you run? Because unfortunately for us going into prison, you know, we're given the choice. You know, are you going to run Uso or are you going to run Blood, Crip, Southsider or North there, whatever it may be? And I was like, yeah, I'm running Uso. You know, I'm running homies, you know, and that's it. That's all. So I was embraced. And then from there, you know, a lot of my education began.
Right. So what were your feelings now? You know, you're getting into your program. You got this, what was your full sentence again?
So I have the lowest of the low. It's crazy because I have a straight life sentence plus 5 years for the gun enhancement. So in totality, it should have been 12, 15, or 20 years. And I ended up doing almost 30.
Wow. And so you had a straight life sentence as a juvenile.
As a juvenile.
Man, that's heavy. So you're in high desert, you're in the program. I mean, you're on the yard, you're programming. What's going through your head now? You know, you got this life sentence and you're still kind of young and you're in this prison where it's new and everything. So what are you thinking now? Are you thinking, well, am I going to go home one day, or this is it? This is my life forever? What is going through your head at this moment?
Right there. I mean, you said it in one phrase, this is my life forever. I can look back now and as a man, be honest about it. You know, I won't say that I was terrified, but I was just filled with like, you know, all these imaginations, you know, like, man, look at these dudes, these are essays over here. And at the time, you know, there was beef in the county jails between, you know, with a certain gang in Long Beach and Usos. And in saying that, I'm walking the yard and I'm looking around and I'm like, well, now I've got weight. I got my weight up. I'm like 220 pounds there. I'm no longer 150. I'm buff and I'm doing things like of that sort. But I'm surrounded by Asians. And again, it's going back to not so much feeling insecure, but, you know, I need my Usos, like, you know, where are we at? But again, this is just opening up. I'm filled with a lot of trepidation because we don't have someone that's speaking for us, and they're naturally looking towards the Usos, you know, because we are, you know, for the most part, the backbone of every car on every yard in every prison. So having that responsibility thrust upon me as a rookie, you know, in my rookie year, the easiest way to put it is a lot, you know. And aside from just trying to like screw my face, because I'm a clown, you know, that's my name. I'm Laughing Boy. When I used to fight, I used to laugh. And anything I do, I like to have fun. But there's a time in your life where you have to grow up and set those things aside. And these are one of those times for me. But what also is going through my mind is the list of Usos who are no good and Usos that they're looking for, representing the city, you know, San Diego, Oceanside, representing the Usos again. So now these things are going through my mind. And like you said earlier, hopelessness. After I was sentenced, there was a hopelessness to it. I had already started cutting ties. And it went beyond me writing the letters. I would call and be like, look, I'm not calling anymore. You know, don't write me. And don't expect the call. Don't worry about it. You take care of my other 6 brothers and sisters and let me do me. You know, my life is over with. Care for those that you can care for. But, you know, and understanding or thinking that I was being noble, like, don't send money to me because my family wasn't rich. You know, I came from humble beginnings throughout my lifetime. I thought I was being noble by saying, hey, focus on my brothers and sisters. Make sure they go to school. Make sure they don't do what I did. Because I don't want any of them as a roommate. I don't want to hear that, you know, they're in the system too. Unfortunately, you know what happened? You know, I had a brother and a sister like almost follow me into the system. But by God's grace, you know, it worked out and they straightened up.
Man, that's good. That's good. So what you brought up right there is very important. I think that those of you who are listening who may have not gotten in trouble but are out there in the streets, what this who said about having that talk with your family, saying, hey, you know, you guys go ahead and move on. I'm not getting out of here. This is my life. I'm done. You know, I had the same talk with my family. Y'all don't know what that feeling is like, having to tell your family, just move on without me. That is a point in your life to where you just given up on hope. Like there's nothing out there for me. And I cannot focus on you guys right now because right where I'm at is where I'm needed. My focus is in here right now. And you guys need to focus on yourselves out there. It's crazy to have to say that to your family. A lot of you don't understand what you put your family through. And like he said, he was being very noble at the time, but he ain't realizing too that his family's doing time with him.
They are. And that was a big part of it.
Yep. Man, that's crazy. So Let me ask you this though. While you were in the penitentiary, did you get in a lot of trouble, or did you stay, kind of keep your nose clean, or did you just do what you had to do? What was it like as far as program in the penitentiary?
I would like to say I look at my life in prison as two halves, but really it's a third. And so that first 2/3, it started off with doing with what I had to do in order not so much to survive, but to fit in, to belong. Again, that street mentality, those insecurities, those issues I had to deal with, and then doing what I wanted to do. Because again, I found myself good at what I was doing. Criminal thinking played a big part of it. And it just goes beyond the thinking aspect of it. It's plotting, it's planning, it's strategizing. And these things made me unique again, within the prison subcultures, all the little cars and things we were doing. So I went from, again, just trying to make it, trying to find my place, my niche, and then making my niche, finding myself, finding out that I love this person, and then going all in on it. Mm-hmm. Then right around 2010, probably like 4 or 5 prisons later, I met the woman who would eventually become my wife. And she's I would like to say, the catalyst behind my change. So again, in those first 2/3 of my term, they were all, again, dealing with hopelessness, the idea of that I'm never going to get out. How do I provide for myself? And even then, I'd like to say that I cut my, ties with my family. But while selling drugs and doing all these things, middlemaning for cell phone sales and doing all these, I was still sending money home. I would still just send it home, but without a letter, or I would have the people on the streets that I was dealing with do these things. And again, in my mind, I'm thinking these things are noble, but all I'm doing is just reopening old wounds and scars. Ron, something that we don't realize is that holidays are meant to be joyous occasions. Unfortunately for our families, they sit there at Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, and there's a seat that's empty, meant for us. And we don't realize that. We don't realize that, like you said, and it's sad that a lot of people don't recognize it, that our families are doing time with us, whether we want them to or not, they are. And so holidays, and like I said, these joyous occasions are marred by our absence.
I say it all the time, Moose, man. What you do affects your loved ones. You might not think that, but you think you're all by yourself and you think you're doing everything to yourself. But the people that care about you, like your family, those who love you, it hurts them. And like you were saying, they don't see you on these holidays. You're not sitting there on that chair. They're missing you. But you think you're just doing your thing and that it's only affecting you. Man, that's some real talk right there. It was you actually answered my next question, because I was going to ask you about when was your pivotal moment, when you realized like, hey, man, this way of thinking, the things I'm doing right now, man, it really isn't me. I really need to focus on something else, maybe get a different different way of thinking. What happened? I mean, you met your wife. So did you start changing from that point on?
Not actually. Well, around 2010, mm-hmm. We as lifers in the lifer community started seeing people go home. And again, in denial management, in that part of my mind, I thought, well, those lifers that are going home, those are the goody goods. Those are the guys who found God the minute they hit county jail and have walked the straight and narrow ever since. They don't have any 115s. I have over 20 115s. They're never going to let me go. But that's the negative self-talk that plays, over and over in our mind. That's the devil, That's Akani in our heads, like, they're never going to let you go. You're too involved. But on top of that, there's this person, this identity that I created in prison that it's hard for me to cut ties with. I'm no longer a private, I'm a major, I'm up there in our group, with our people. And I'm thinking like, man, am I willing to let this all go? But then again, there's that hope never dies. I don't care what the fuck anyone says. And I'll say it for myself that even though, I may say the tough words, in my heart, I always thought about going home. Because the thing is, we're stuck in what's called the time warp. We're arrested development. When people would ask how old my family members were, my brothers and sisters, or just I could only remember them from 1992 to 93. I couldn't age them any further. But when I received photos, or when I would be on the cell phone and I would look them up on social media and I'd see them, like my dad would have gray, you know, my sisters and brothers would be, you know, they would have aged like 20 plus years. But the way that I see them in my mind's eye, they're still little kids. Something also that I didn't realize was the resentments I created with my siblings. You know, I thought, you know, they were resilient. They're going to grow up, have their lives, do what they got to do. But they were actually mad at me. You know, they were like, and I didn't know this till later on when it goes back to the question you asked, when did I start changing? A lot of it started changing for me, again, when I first met my wife, realizing they were letting lifers go home, but having these conversations with my family, reestablishing, you know, contact with them and hearing what they had to say. Like, you know, you left us. Like, I left you. You know, I did what I had to do. Being offensive, rather than being sympathetic and understanding. You know, we needed you out here to help us. You know, mom and dad struggled. You know, then mom passed a year after I left. And that was a difficult, tumultuous time in my life. That further, you know, distanced myself, not just from God, from any hope of going home. You know, my mother died. How do I deal with that? So.
Man, yeah, it's crazy that, you know, we go through these things in life. And it goes back to what I was telling you about how I didn't know what being a man was about and things like that. I didn't know what the world was about. I didn't know nothing. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a dad that taught me things or told me about what to expect out of life and peer pressures and all that stuff. And like you said, man, you know, just living that type of life, you think a certain way. You don't think that they're affected from you and what you've done. You think you've only affected your life. And then having to deal with the loss of moms and things like that, you know, creates more of a distance. Man, that's just so real what you're saying right there, you know, because I lost my sister, you know, to cancer when I was in CY.
Yeah.
And you know, I blame God. You know, my mom used to, you know, I'd be calling home collect and she would tell me, you know, son, pray to God. And I'd be like, Mom, F God, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was really angry and I just felt like, you know, no one's there going to help me. No one's going to help me. No one's there to save me. I got me. That's it. But once you start realizing, man, you need people, family, your siblings, and that communication, you realize, man, hey, man, I had it all wrong. I did, you know, and that's some good stuff right there. So you got to reconnect with family during this time in prison. You started changing the way you were thinking, realizing these things. So how long did it take before, you know, the board, like when you really started seeing like, man, I do got action at going home?
So again, this is around 2010, and nothing we do in life, I'd like to say, well, speaking for myself, is immediate. You know, we have the idea, or we try to visualize what we want to be or how we would like to be. And I was far from being congruent with any of those things. I straddled the fence. So going to board around 2009, I'm coming off a 5-year denial. I go back in 2014, I get another 5. But it's in this time frame that I'm starting to see and understand and realize things. I finally run into somebody that I know from the lifestyle, and he happened to be a Southsider. We did a lot of time in the hole together. And when I met him, you know, we're holding group. This is in Chuckawalla when all this is happening. So this is one of the prisons along with San Quentin and Solano that are like pro-lifer, like they're letting guys go home. And for me to run into this one individual is, and actually have a conversation with them where he tells me like, look, James, like, I don't know if you know, but I'm gone in 2 weeks. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Like, gone where? Like, family visit food? Like, when they give them back to us, he's like, I'm going home. And I took a second, I took a step back, and I saw it in his eyes. You know, there was something different in his eyes, and his whole folinga, his whole mannerism. And there was like a calmness, and there was a peace in his eyes where, you know, in our eyes, when we're predators and we have like this shiftiness, you know, this darkness in there. But he was like, the burden had been lifted from him. He was like, no, I'm going home. And I want you to know that you can go home too. And it was at that point, again, God put in my path certain individuals and certain things to help me not just realize these things, but follow through with them. They have this thing called the 5 stages of change. And one of them is the pre-contemplation stage, where we think that nothing is wrong with us. You know, we live life as it is, you know, fuck you, accept me for me. Then there's the contemplation stage where we say, like, look, shit is hard, I get it, you know, but it is what it is. And I'm too far invested in who I am and what I'm doing to want to change. Then there's the preparation stage where we want to be like, look, man, I'm thinking, I mean, where I want to do things differently. I want to try to do things different or be differently. So I'm going to ask about it, but I'm not really going to do it. Then there's the action phase where you actually start attending these groups. And for me, the biggest part about attending any of these groups, Ron, was being seen by the homies, because there weren't too many homies going to these groups. It was always the other races. Yeah. But, you know, we're others. We're Usos. We don't, you know, what they do is what they do. Yeah. But the fact that, you know, no one else is going to these groups made it hard for me. I was blessed that the Uso Vika, the Uso Pele, they were all in Chuckawalla with me, and they were going to these groups. So I wasn't so much uncomfortable, but the fact that they were already on this path to getting out, it helped me. Right. So they took me under their wing. They were like, hey, let's go to these classes, let's go. And I'm not gonna lie, Ron, I was bullshitting. You know, I'll be riding kites, trying not to fall asleep, thinking about how many points I scored in the basketball tournament rather than paying attention to what was being said. But eventually, over time, you know, that stuff started sinking. I started hearing people talk about things I could relate to. I started seeing people when the Usos started, there's an Uso named Arnold, who was Vika's homeboy. When he started facilitating a gang class, and I started hearing him talk, and I started seeing myself in him, and just hearing them raise their hands and you know, actively participating in these groups instead of being at the back of the bus, too cool to do anything, I started thinking like differently, man. I started seeing the world differently. And what it took was someone who looked like me, act like me, and talk like me to make me want to change me.
Wow. Yeah. So man, I apologize. I'm just caught up in your story. So you start going to these groups and everything. You see other people who look like you and talk like you going to the groups. It gave you more of a confidence and support in a way to do that. But you know, what I'm seeing is that when we start making choices like that, because I felt the same way, you know, when I started doing my thing and trying to figure out my life and everything, you know, you start to realize like, hey man, I was in some kind of dream state or something, you know. Yeah. Like, that wasn't real life. You know what I mean? That's not how you be a man. That's not how you conduct business. That's not how you handle things. And being a man is getting yourself straight and taking care of your responsibilities and your family and things like that. So man, congratulations to you. So you did what, 30 years, 29 years, you were like a few days shy of 30 years. What was it like when you went to board and they finally, you know, gave you that go ahead, you're going to go home? I think after that, you have to wait for your date.
So again, I'm trying to go to these places that are letting people go home. Solano was one of them. I was in Solano and I got a 115, and before I could go to board, I was transferred out. I went to CMC. And again, it's one of those prisons where, you know, they have a lot of pro-lifer groups. I go there and I get a 3-year denial. And I'm thinking, because I'm at this stage of my life where I'm not bullshitting anymore, Ron. I'm not straddling the fence. You know, who I am in the dark is who I am in the light. Now I'm facilitating. Now I'm mentoring. I'm talking the talk. I'm walking the walk. And if you're not with that, then, you know, I humbly, you know, excuse myself from, you know, from your presence and these situations. Any Uso, anybody I know from my past, not Uso, but Uso or otherwise, I'm like, look, man, like that Mexican boy did to me in Chuckawalla, I'm like, look, we can go home. And I'm trying to do my best. Unfortunately, there's a reason why I did almost 30 years as a juvenile lifer on a straight life sentence, because I have a past, I have a history. That being said, I was devastated. I was devastated. I got a 3-year denial. I'm with the woman who would eventually be my wife. Been together for numerous years now, and I get transferred. The opportunity to transfer to a level 1. So that's unheard of. You know that. Yeah. You know, first of all, we were never supposed to go to level 2s. They let us go to level 2s. Now they're saying they're opening up level 1s for lifers, but you have to have these criteria. And one of them was a 3-year denial. I was prepared. I went in there. I thought I would get it. I had all the letters, all the 128s, everything I could get, everything they ever asked of me. It wasn't enough. They were like, look, we just need to be sure. We just need to be sure about you, Rasmussen, because you're intelligent, you're smart, you have the gift of gab, and we can't tell whether or not, you're a con man, and that's the thing. So just give us a little more time, give us a little more disciplinary free time. And we commend you on what you're doing, but give us a little more time. Mm-hmm. Long story short, I ended up going into Ashby, and I got the date. And when I got it, like I said, I felt it within me. My spirit was at peace. God is in my life. Everything's going the way it's supposed to happen. I get the date, and I'm not going to lie, I was so emotional. I cried like a baby. Like, I got the hiccups. I ain't got the hiccups since, like, the last time my dad beat me, and I couldn't stop crying. Those, like I was hyperventilating. And he wasn't even into his full spiel. He was like 2 sentences in, and when he didn't even say that I was found suitable. He said that we no longer feel you pose a threat to society. And when he said that, I knew it was over, because that's the one component for release, is that you no longer pose a threat to society. And when he said that, my shoulders dropped, all the tension, everything left me. And I cried, and I couldn't hear the rest. And I did hear pieces. And then he did say the words that I was found suitable. And I was just overwhelmed with just joy and happiness, not just for myself, but for my family and my wife and all those brothers who were in those groups with me in the trenches with me, trying to walk away or divorce themselves from the life. So yeah, I was emotional.
Oh yeah, I believe it, Us, man. It's emotional feeling. 30 years, man. So tell us what it was like. You had to wait probably for a few months, maybe.
So for attempted murder, especially being a juvenile, COVID-19. So all these things are lining up. They said, oh, attempted murder, oh, juvenile, oh, COVID, early kickouts. You'll probably do 30 to 45, but the max is 120. This is where, my past again comes back to haunt me. I go to 119 days and I get a notice from the governor instructing the board. And here's the thing. I found out that he cannot himself actually intervene or interfere with my release date, because I don't have a murder. I don't have a body. I don't have to go before him. But what he can do is make the suggestion to the panel to take me back in what's called an en banc hearing. And he did that. So I ended up doing almost 140 something days beyond my time. And what's sad and upsetting and disappointing was that in that time, I could have been home before Thanksgiving, because I got found suitable on October 6th. I was like, man, I might be home by Thanksgiving. Babe, family, it's okay. God is good. I'm suitable. That's all we need to focus on. Maybe I'll be home for Christmas. Maybe I'll be home for New Year. Maybe I'll be home for Valentine's Day, babe. But again, it goes to my testimony as a changed person. And I know you know about this. Either you're all in or you're not. And my change is genuine. My walk is genuine. Who I am is what you see. And so while people were saying, hold on, they just want to see how you're going to react, I said, how am I supposed to react? Am I supposed to throw a hissy fit, write a 602, go crazy? No, man. It's God's will. And I'm going to go home when I'm supposed to go home. And that's the message I want to tell people still fighting, trying to get out. We go home when we're meant to go home, so that when we do go home, it's the best version of me. It took me 7 tries to get home. And this is the best version of me. Anytime before this time, Ron, and I'm telling you in all honesty, I probably would have come back. I wouldn't have internalized, the messages, the teachings. I would have just, like the board said, I would have been the con man saying the right things because I have a good memory and a good way of explaining things. But I was genuine. So here I am, sitting with you.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay. So, man, I want to say this before I move on real quick. You guys, you heard the man, 30 years off of attempted murder. He didn't get no body. It was an attempt. I've seen people who had bodies go home before that, So y'all be careful out there, man. I'm telling you, man, don't be involved in nothing like that, man. It's not worth it. You see, this man did 30 years behind an attempt, you know what I'm saying? So, and he had a life sentence at that. All right. But moving on, Oos, you ended up getting paroled. Tell us, man, what your experience was like on that first day walking out after all that time.
So they tell me I'm going home on a Thursday, but they tell me this on like a Tuesday, like in 2 days you're going home. You know, you wait for the counselor to call you to tell you when it's over, like when you're out date. And when they tell me this, it's basically they ask me if I have a ride, do I know where I'm going, so on and so forth. And I'm like, yeah. And it's surreal. I'm in a fog. You know, I've already got stuff packaged up. And here's the thing, it's the jinx. And when I say by jinx is when I was found suitable, everyone's calling shit like, you know, oh, who's your TV going to? Who's the radio going to? Who's the CDs? Who's the MP3 player? Who's this going? And I was like, you got it. You know, whoever you speak first, you get first, you know. But the jinx, you don't do that till you actually go home.
Right.
But I'm floating and they tell me this and I come back and I'm in the haze, I'm in the cloud and they're like, what's up, man? Are you good? You all right? And I'm like, man, they told me Thursday and this is Tuesday. And like Thursday, I'm getting hugs and it's like wildfire. They're coming to hug me because we have a community in there, you know, of lifers and dudes who they're just happy. They're genuinely happy to see people, especially lifers, go home. And that's something I really miss is the camaraderie, the brotherhood, you know. So I get on the phone and I make the call. Now, mind you, we're in COVID-19, so we don't get phone calls like every day. We're getting them like every other day or every 2 days based on the schedule because it's just our building by itself on the yard. So I have to wait a long time to, you know, like, well, it seems like a long time, but like a little over 48 hours to tell my wife and my people that I'm coming home Thursday, like, baby, come get me. And again, there's the devil and then there's these people that watch because I know people that, and I don't, maybe I should, you know, Ron, maybe I should like not be with them, but they're my friends and my people that I love. And they're like, Oos, like, here's the clap, Oos, here's the, you know, get at your people right now, call them. Like, Oos, like, what would I look like, you know, tented up on your bunk, calling these people after everything I'm telling these people in groups. I love you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the offer, but I can't, you know, I'm going to wait these 36 or how many rounds and I'm going to call my wife and put it out there. And these are the people that I'm trying to help out of this darkness because they're just starting their time off, you know, they got a long way to go. And I'm like, you know, enjoy it now, but understand this. Consequences, Ron, it's a big part of what we do. We may not have a lot of options, but we always got a choice. And consequences, for some reason or another, we always think they have something to do with something bad. The consequences is this. No, consequence is the result of. So the result of the decisions we make. So understand this, Oos. What you're doing now, it may not affect you in the moment, and it may boost your reputation. It's cool to have a clap. It's good. Been there, done that. We all have. But know this, when it's time to go home, and if you're caught for this, they're going to reflect on these things.
Right.
Again, 30 years on the life sentence on attempted murder. Yep. You know, so that's the message.
Man, thank you for the message, Oos. So what did you eat? You know, first day out, you know, what was your dream meal?
I like to say I had something in mind, but what it ended up happening is that, you know, we didn't stop at a fast food restaurant or anything. The first thing I did is I went and got some kicks. Because I always tell people when I go home, I'm leaving everything. And I kept real to that. I walked out in my Adidas slippers. I would have walked out in some jab slaps if I had them or some regular shower shoes if I could find them. But everyone's got the slip-ons. So I went home in my slip-ons, which I've had for like 5 years. So I didn't feel too bad about not leaving them. So I was like, babe, let's go get some shoes. But like, take me home. Like, she don't want to go to like, you know, Burger King or any fast food joint, any Asian restaurants, all you can. I was like, no, just let's just get home as soon as we can. And the first meal I ate was a home-cooked meal. And I think it was, my wife's Italian. So it was an Italian. It was, I'm locking up in my brain, but it was chicken something, but it was bomb. It was good. And family was there with chocolate cake and it was just I could barely remember that day, let alone what I ate. Because
it was something better than prison food for sure.
And I don't even want to get into that. I'm like 60 pounds heavier from when I pulled.
That's what I'm saying. You know, when I got out, I just ate everything.
I'm doing that too, man. Consequences now. I'm dealing with consequences. This is hard tying my shoes.
Yep. Man, Oos, man, this is some good stuff. Let me ask you this before I let you go. Talk to yourself, man. Talk to yourself, your younger version of yourself, man. And what advice would you give that person who is going through all this stuff, this peer pressure, wanting to fit in, not feeling like you're fitting in, just feeling just like an outcast, and trying to figure out what you need to do as far as being a man in life? What would you give your younger self as far as advice today?
Man, not only is that a good and powerful question, it really asks the person to really look back on himself. So what I would tell myself is, look, things aren't as serious as you make them out to be. Mom and dad love you, and family is everything. They're the most important thing, next to God. You may think that God is not in your life or by your side, but he is. Everything you do has its reason or its purpose, its season. And if you hold true to that, everything will work out. Love yourself for yourself and not what you think people think you should be or act like. Be unique. You were born into this world for a reason, whether that's to be a brother, a father, a son. You're meant to be something. And you can't be who you're meant to be if you're busy trying to be something else or something that someone else wants you to be. In a world where you can be anything you want to be, why be a little whoop-de-woo when you could be a big you? And that's the advice I would give myself.
Man, powerful advice, Oos. Man, some real shit right there, Oos. Is there anything else you want to say to those guys that are in there, that are looking for, a date or just a chance to go home or just a little bit of hope? Is there any more advice that you would want to give them if they were to be listening to you right now?
It's something that me and the brothers right here. So what I have are these T-shirts. It's FO, and it's Fa Tasino or Uso. And it's an organization right now that we're not the first in what we do or what we're trying to do. And that's, again, reach into the prisons. We have the youth outreach, and that's something we're doing where we're trying to go back inside and help these Usos and everyone else lost to the lie of gangs and everything other than that. And the message I would have for these people is look, it's called growing pains for a reason. You're going to do things, and again, you're going to suffer the consequences. But so long as you know and understand them, then you have nothing to complain about. Hurt people. And in order to change that, you have to first forgive yourself, understand why you hurt, and forgive those people who hurt you. Because holding on to those things just anchor you to your past, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And that's all I can say, Ron. I thank you for having me here today. God bless you. Like I said, your purpose is this, not to be in prison doing 30 to life. It's to be out here getting the message out to other people. So, man, one love, Oos.
Man, much love, Oos. I appreciate you coming on here with us and sharing your story, man. You all know what it is. Stay the fuck out of trouble.
All the time.